Mark Kermode is here with Cult Film Corner tonight, The Killing of Sister George.
Directed by Robert Aldrich and made in 1968, and it's one of those films that people remember for a very specific reason, okay? The reason people remember it was that it was pretty much one of the first mainstream films that ever featured, a lesbian sex scene in it that actually got released in the cinemas over here. This is the thing that everyone remembers about it, okay? And this is pretty much the basis of its cult following. However, before we talk about that, that's not really what the film's about, okay? Right. The film is based on a stage play by Frank Marcus, and it's the story, it stars Beryl Reid, the stage play stars Beryl Reid as well. It's the story of a woman who's working on a BBC soap as Sister George, okay? That's the character she plays. She's declining into alcoholism, and she has a relationship with Susanna York, who's called Childy. So she is, she's a lesbian, but in the stage play, that's never really overtly dealt with.
Right.
She's being killed off in the series, so she's going to lose her job. What's also happening is that a slimy BBC executive is in the process of stealing Childy away from her. So basically, her entire life is falling apart.
Right.
The film is like the play is like a character study. It's very comic, very dark, very humorous, but it never really gets to grips with the sexual subject matter. Robert Aldrich comes along and decides that he wants to turn it into a film. But what he wants to do is to make explicit something which was only implicit in the stage play. He actually, wants to have the relationship put up there on the screen. He gives the part to Beryl Reid. Susanna York comes on a little bit later on, and they are both very kind of anxious about this. I was going through, there's two biographies. The Beryl Reid biography, So Much Love, which is absolutely lovely, talks very sort of frankly about this. She says, Robert Aldrich had decided there should be some very sexy moments between George and Childy. I completely disagreed, and though I wanted to do this film more than anything else, I said, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Aldrich, but I can't do that. I have no intention of making a sex film. Right. And she waited for 2 days, and after Robert Aldrich came back to her and said, okay, fine, you don't have to. And what he did was he then put in a sex scene between Susanna York and the woman who's the slimy BBC executive, which is about 2 minutes long, and which became the subject of the most heated and contentious censorship row of the late 1960s. Now, I think we'll move on to that later, because that's, because obviously I have loads of fantastic nitty-gritty.
I'm sure you do. And the interesting thing, because, slimy BBC executives and lesbian nuns is based on fact.
It is, actually. It's based on the true story. What I want to do is I want to play this clip, okay, just to give you a flavour of what the film is really like. This is Beryl Reid is just so fantastic in this movie. She's
fantastic in everything, isn't she?
Yeah, but particularly in this, and she was immensely proud of this film, as was Susanna York, who actually said she thought it was one of the best things that she's done. The plot here is basically Beryl Reid is being given a dressing down because a couple of days ago she's gone out and she's had a few. She's got what was that phrase they used in the trail the other? She's got blathered.
Bladdered.
She's got completely bladdered.
Yeah.
And she's jumped into a taxi which is populated by 2 nuns who she has given a run for her money and who have complained, and consequently the BBC executive has come round to give her and Childy a dressing down.
Of course I wasn't drunk. I can remember everything that happened, everything I did.
Miss Buckridge, I'm sure your memory of subsequent events is excellent. But the fact remains that according to the Mother Superior of the Convent of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, you boarded a taxi bearing as passengers 2 novitiate nuns from Ireland who had just arrived at King's Cross Station.
Well, how was I to know there were novitiates?
You boarded this taxi in a state of advanced inebriation and proceeded to assault the 2 nuns, subjecting them to actual physical violence.
Oh, George. Oh, shut up. It wasn't a bit like that. In the first place, I certainly wasn't drunk. I saw this taxi draw up at the traffic light, so naturally I got in. And there were these 2 black things screaming blue murder.
Well, why didn't you immediately get out again?
Well, I would have, but the taxi started off, and anyway, I'd had a very nasty shock myself. What were they screaming and flapping about? I thought they were bats.
Okay, so as we proved, the point is, it stands up on its own as a comedy, and as a movie with a fantastic performance by Beryl Reid and by Susanna York. Okay, however, the thing which really sort of put Sister George on the map and has given it cult status in the past is that it featured, a lesbian sex scene. What happened was that John Trevelyan, who was head of the British Board of Film Classification, censorship as they were then, basically flatly refused to pass it. And he said in his letter to the distributors, "We are not prepared as yet to accept lesbian sex to this point. You can arrange to try another re-editing of the scene, but I hold out little hope that you'll be able to get away with it." What there is that there is, and in the original, there is a 2-minute scene between Susanna York and Coral Brown. So what happened was the BBFC just said flatly, you can't do this. Okay, and I'm mentioning this now particularly because if you've been reading the papers, you know that the new British Board of Film Classification report is just out, and it turns out they've been lopping more stuff than they have in years and years and years. So what the distributors did was they said, hang about a minute, forget this. We'll go to the councils individually and see whether they will let us show the movie in a slightly edited form. And it turned out that I think it was, about 7 or 8 councils said, okay, yes, we will allow this to be shown.
Right.
The BBFC were really annoyed about this. They said, all right, come back again, we'll have another look at it. So that they came back, and what they came to a kind of, because the BBFC don't like the councils to kind of go off on their own, they came back, having arrived at a compromise version, okay? And the compromise version was this. They were prepared to pass the sex scene up to the point at which until the point that the young girl starts to writhe and gasp orgasmically. They would not, however, accept the 2 women kissing passionately, but they would accept a few shots which lead satisfactorily up to the entry of Sister George. I mean, this is the kind of angels dancing on the head of a pin nonsense that they have been indulging in for the last, however many years it is. So basically what happened was the movie went out with the scene partially intact. Again, from Beryl Reid's absolutely marvellous biography, so much of it. This is what she says about it. This is just lovely. When the movie opened, it opened in London at the Prince Charles Theatre. They were waist high in £5 notes, I remember, in the box office. When it went to the provinces, Robert would say, if you go to Liverpool, you'll see the entire scene. But if you go to Birkenhead or somewhere else fairly near, then 3/4 of a minute will be cut out. So, of course, people flew all over the place. And apart from the fact that it was such a good film, that's partly the reason why it did such wonderful business. Nice. Looking at the film again now, there is a lovely sort of naivety about it. And this is the scenes that they're talking about. They're not sex scenes. They are very beautifully done and sort of tender love scenes. One interesting point is that whole 2-minute sequence doesn't have any music on it because Aldrich knew that they were going to run into problems with the censors. And if you put music, you have to go back and re-edit the music track. So if you do something silent, it means, it's like you're almost offering it up to the censors on a plate saying, there we are. But, so that's the thing that gave it its notoriety. But the thing that now it stands up for is that it is just, it's a marvellously put together comedy with this fantastic, enigmatic, magnetic performance by Beryl Reid. It's just, just a laugh riot.
And have we got copies of this to give away?
We have. Incidentally, when I say laugh riot, and my version of laugh riot, incidentally, is very dark, very miserable, very grim, very downbeat. But it's still a laugh riot.
Right.
Okay. Yes, we do have copies of it to give away.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I was talking about sex scenes.
Yes.
No, not that.
Right.
But I was watching Don't Look Now again on video, and I was watching Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. And isn't the popular myth of that was for real?
The story is that it was for real, and there was only them and Nick Rogue in the room together. Although I have to say, I met Nick Rogue for the first time last week, and I was so flabbergasted that I didn't have the guts to say to him, "So, Nick."
I mean, the only thing that put me off about that is a really horny scene that I always think. The thing I'd never noticed before that sort of made it slightly less horny was that in the run-up to that, the first time ever, I noticed that Julie Christie's knickers were blue brine nylon.
My favourite.
Oh, dear.
Competition
Quality jingle. Right, okay. Because we're doing this earlier than normal because in the last half hour we've got a fabulous musical conceit which runs through the whole of the half hour.
A hackneyed mix.
Something like that, yeah, that'll be it. So, which do you want to do? First week, last week, this week, first or second, last week, then?
Winning your copies of The Killing of Sister George. I was going to do, what was the only job that Beryl Reid, in the movie, what was the only job that she gets offered after she's lost the Sister George gig? And of course the answer is that she gets offered the voice of Clarabelle Cow, but I figured that was...
Controller of Radio 1.
Yes, that was too complicated. But also, as I was walking down the corridor, I had this musical thing happen to me, which I realised I'm going to ask you a crap musical question in that case. Okay, Killing of Sister George, groundbreaking movie, 1968, lesbian sex scene on British screens. Early 1970s, Rod Stewart record of a similar name dealing with a similar subject. What was it called?
Killing of Sister Bill.
Right.
Is that right?
You see, what's the point?
I want to try. I don't want to win the video.
You never win anything. In fact,
Cobblers.
You would have gone in for the lottery if you thought you had a chance of winning.
It's a bloody lottery, isn't it?
Right, okay.
Answers on a postcard too.
Yeah, and what's the title of the competition this week?
Killing of Sister Bill.
The Killing of Sister Bill.
Yes, a spitting Guinness.
Mark, shut at you. Mark Kermode.
Mark, shut at you,
Radio 1, BBC North, Oxford Road, Manchester, M61SJ.